demonstrating on the street? And how is there so much attention on Kenya's budget cycle in this financial year and perhaps the last financial year? Well, here's some history. The 2010 Constitution actually changed the national budgeting process. Before that, budgeting was exclusively an executive business. Revenues and expenditures were all decided in State House. And so the contents of the national budget were only revealed on Budget Day with lots of fanfare. That's why perhaps Budget Day has been such an important annual event really for Kenyans, because they were not aware of what was in the budget. In fact, a lot of betting happened before the 2010 Constitution as to which prices would come down and which ones would go up. However, the 2010 Constitution then came in and allowed people's representatives, members of parliament essentially, to get involved in the budgeting process. In addition, the voters were also involved through a public participation process. Now, since 2010, the budgeting process has been quite quiet, so to speak. But over the last 2 years, budgeting has become contentious. There are more parties involved, more entrenched in the law or the Constitution. Public participation is entrenched in the Constitution. And so the recent changes have made Kenyans realize that their views matter. That's where we are today, in studio with us, as we take a look at that developing anti-tax protests in the Nairobi Central Business District and indeed across the country. We have political analyst Brian Nabiswa as well as governance expert Steve Ogutu. Gentlemen, many thanks for staying on with us. Now, there's been a lot of concern as to how much Kenyans know about the budgeting process now that they're so deeply engraved in it. Nabiswa, why do you think Kenyans have been so interested? This is the second controversial finance bill. Why do you think Kenyans are so interested, and what really changed to spark that? Because we had the Constitution for what, 12 years now, 11 years, but what sparked that change in the national budgeting process?
No, first, I think there is less public participation on the whole issue about budgeting process. And we've had these issues about people, calling barazas, where the budget committee and the finance committee calls a few individuals in the name of doing public participation, which is not less. And most of the people, especially except those who are always interested in matters to do with finance and budgeting, are aware of what goes on and what is constituted in the budget. Mm-hmm. So, and also we have to acknowledge that the whole process has been, it's always politicized. As much as you find that it doesn't favor you, it has been political issue. Just to take a few examples, when during in the year, was it in the year 2020, around 2020, 2021, mm-hmm. when they were increasing, they're adding, introducing an 8% VAT on fuel, which was previously zero rated. You remember the side which was the pro-handshake side was supporting that 8%. Mm-hmm. Now, the current government, which was in government but appeared to be in opposition, were totally against that issue of 8% increment, and they campaigned on it a lot. But right now, it's them who are against taxes and whatever, who are implementing and propagating for more taxes. So the whole issue has been, I can't say it's in a way politicized by our political class. Now, in the finance bill, if I'm on the side which is not for that bill or which is not for that budget, I'll just pick one contagious issue and run away with. Like in this year, in this financial year's bill, you saw the first thing that those who are against the bill, the members of parliament, the opposition side, ran with was the introduction of or increase of VAT on bread, increase on VAT, on diapers, sanitary towels, because they know this is a common issue that touches, an issue that really touches the common mwananchi down there. And they know that if I go to the people and tell them that this government or this finance bill is going to increase the price of sanitary towels, diapers, and bread, so the common people will just know that we are finished. So, and not forgetting that there, in that bill, there are some of the contagious, even contagious sections or articles which are more, even will have more impact on the Kenyan economy than just bread and diapers. So the issue, I have to say that it's always a political issue,
right,
and less public participation.
It is an issue of politics, it is an issue of governance. But when you get to the real issues, Steve,
right,
we have a country to run. Kenyans voted for this government, and Kenyans somehow must find a way to finance this government. So that being said, when you look at the finance bill and the contentious clauses, which were dropped, a 200 billion shilling loophole or gap, essentially, in projected revenue collection. So this means less tax revenues, but Kenyans still want government services and still want government jobs. So something must give, right? So with fewer taxes, the government's alternative is borrowing, right? And we have the Constitution, which says the burdens and benefits of the use of resources and public borrowing shall be shared equitably between present and future generations. And so if the government drops contentious clauses, the government resorts to borrowing, and the same taxpayers will still pay that money that has been borrowed. Because we must run a country.
Right.
Which way, which direction do you suggest the country takes?
I mean, I think we all agree, and I think Kenyans don't have an issue with this, that the only way to run a country is through taxation. That I think we all agree. But I think where we draw the line is when it comes to what are we getting in return as taxpayers, you know, in terms of health services, in terms of jobs, opportunities, in terms of agriculture, which is the backbone of this country. I mean, how are we? What are we getting in return? And therefore, that calls on speaks to the question on accountability. And I think the Auditor General has said this many times, you know, and not just in this regime, but also in the previous regime, that we waste a lot of resources, you know, through corruption. You know, President Uhuru told us that we lose 2 billion nearly every day. The Auditor General Office has said many times that we lose more than a third of our national budget to corruption. And therefore, I think the way to go is the President, I think, should really seek to seal those loopholes. Even as he talks about tax hikes, we also need to hear him talking about how he's tackling corruption. And I'm not just talking, by the way, we need to see people behind bars, because there are many cases of corruption that have been reported, but we don't see any action. So for me, I don't think the problem is really taxation. I think revenue collection and stuff like that. I think the problem lies on how we manage what we have.
All right.
You know?
Well, that's a conversation that the protesters also want heard. But Nabiswa, the other alternative would then be to reduce expenditure and live within our means. I mean, it is either we make amendments to this bill and have a bigger funding gap, or we withdraw the bill and revert to the finance bill of the current financial year, or cut our expenditure. And so if, you know, the amendments or concessions have reduced or, increase the budget hole by 300 billion shillings, and we slash the entire budgetary expenditure by 300 billion shillings. But then that would mean, among other things, merging departments, losing jobs, and no political leader wants to hear that they're going to lose their jobs, that, you know, CAS positions are no longer going to be there. It's all about, personal interest. Which way, in your view, would be a win-win situation for both parties? Yeah,
actually, all those options, they are the best for us as a country and the economy at the moment. But looking at the budget itself, you know, sometimes you wonder if really the economy is not going well, the economy is not really viable to be supported. And you look at the budget, every year the budget is growing, the budget is expanding. And you look at some of the allocations and some of the components on the same budget, actually they are not even necessary at the moment. Also, you look at how these leaders in office conduct themselves, how they do, what they say and what they do. Sometimes you wonder, and actually they fuel what is happening now with on the streets. Just to be pragmatic, you look previously, we've had, and even the Deputy President talked about it. Today, a member of parliament, a governor or a president, you are telling me that the country does not have funds, the country is drained, there is no funds. Then the next day, you come out with 12 million cash, carrying 12 million cash. You are telling me that the country does not have funds, the country is in... Then you yourself, you are flying in luxury, yeah? Every week, every month, we have the delegations from the country who are going out. And they are going out in numbers, the expenditure. Look at the leaders themselves. It's their lifestyle. But how the hell you are telling us that the country is infiltrated when you yourself you are putting on shoes worth 3 million? That's actually doesn't add up. So it's ideally let them just cut down the budget. Some of the projects on the budget that we have, we find them not necessary. I usually think, like, you want to give me a house, a best house, me to sleep in that house, but I don't have, I have nothing to eat. Will I even sleep in that house? No. Right. You are making me a highway when I don't have something on my pocket. There will be no need for that highway. So let this budget be cut down. If it goes down, also the expenditures or the sources of that funds will go down. Right. And also, on the other hand, the Kenya Revenue Authority, there is a lot of, I can say, mismatch in what they need to up their games in their collection, because every time there is a shortfall in their collection because of either poor means of collection, and actually some of the care officers are the ones who are fueling some of corruption and aiding the taxpayers to evade.
You know, when you say they need to to really up their game, you basically mean that they need to see Kenyans being taxed, you know?
No, in terms of attaining.
Anyway,
efficiency is also an issue.
But
I'd like to move on. What we can perhaps accept as a fact is the fact that the finance bill will remain contentious in every election cycle, in every budget cycle, as countries seek to develop. The question is whether there is a conducive economy to grow the lives of Kenyans, for Kenyans to develop themselves, and that is what Kenyans can agree has not reflected even in the state of the economy. Now, as we take a look at members of parliament debating this bill today, there's several options on the table. Amendments, including about 135 amendments that had already been proposed by members of parliament, throwing the bill out altogether. But the budget process, Parliament essentially plays a huge role in the budget process itself. So let's focus on Parliament and members of Parliament. Right now, the duty of a member of Parliament in any democracy is legislation. However, in Kenya, MPs also have the role of development through the Constituency Development Fund, and they seem to have forgotten their role of legislation, or brought it as an afterthought, and focusing largely on that CDF that makes them very, very relevant in their constituencies. So relevant for them that it was an interesting debate in Parliament last week, and we had a member of Parliament who stood up and said, "Mr. Speaker, there's a stranger in Parliament," because a member of Parliament who had not been seen since maybe 2023 finally appeared in Parliament to vote for the finance bill. What are your thoughts, Steve, on the pressure Kenyans have put on their members of Parliament? They'll say an MP who fails to make a significant impact on the floor of the House and in-House committees is an ineffective member of Parliament. We saw over 22 MPs miss out on the vote on the second reading of the finance bill. Do you expect any absentees today, considering this is a process on the calendar every financial year?
Right. I think that has always been the tactic when it comes to voting on such contentious issues. And in a case where you have, say, for example, in the context of Kenya Kwanza and the current government, where you have certain MPs who cross the path, cross the floor from opposition to join the government, but now they're facing a lot of pressure in their constituencies, and so, and because they don't want to be seen as people who support this particular bill, they'll want to stay at home and just be silent. But also that silence also means support for this, because if you don't come to vote, it means the government still has that majority, and I think that is a tactic that they have been using, and which I think is just not right. And like you have said, I think the missing link when it comes to development in this country and accountability and good governance has been the parliament. And this is because of what I've said. They seem to be, for lack of a better term, be in bed with the executive. They seem to take a lot of instructions from executive. The Constitution, the doctrine of separation of power is very clear. It talks about each one of those three arms of government, judiciary, parliament, and executive, have clearly spelled out roles. But of course, it also talks about the interdependence, where they have to collaborate. But that interdependence should not come at the expense of the primary roles of these arms. Like Parliament, we are seeing very less of oversight. We are seeing very less of representation. And citizens are picking this. We've seen them going to offices of these parliamentarians and calling them out. Like, your vote did not represent our views. And when you talk about public participation, for example, we were told by the Kimani-led committee that they did thorough public participation, that there has never been a public participation like they conducted during the drafting and the process of this bill. Mm-hmm. But what we are seeing from the rage, by the public is the contrary. Right.
Does not reflect
the will. Does not reflect, and therefore I think
public participation.
We have to really rethink. Article 69 of our Constitution, Section D, is very clear on public participation and the framework, and it defines the parameters and how to achieve that. Mm-hmm. And I think we need to really maybe repeal that section and look at what is a quality public participation. So it's not just about numbers, but also about how do we come up with a framework that ensures that citizens' views are truly captured.
Right, that's a conversation. It's a gap that has been identified by many stakeholders there, the lack of a proper framework to govern public participation in the country. But Nabiswa, still on the issue of members of parliament, and perhaps part of the paradigm shift that is coming with this pivotal role in Kenya's democracy is the manner in which we assess our members of parliament and our representatives. It is common to say, I will vote for him because he built 3 classrooms, he built 5 toilets, he has a development record, and so we are going to vote for him. However, the role of a member of parliament of legislation in the House is more important. When MPs vote recklessly or abstain from voting on such important issues, the consequences can be detrimental. And we saw in the last year's finance bill, we had MPs who voted in the finance bill, voted yes, only to later admit their ignorance to the constituents, that they hadn't actually read part of the tax proposals in the bill that were now directly impacting the people in their constituency. What kind of paradigm shifts is this likely to do, not just on the finance bill, but on several other legislation that MPs should vote on the floor of the House?
We've had a challenge in terms on and the approach on how we assess our leaders, especially the members of parliament. And it's true, our assessments are always misplaced. We don't assess our leaders in terms of their roles and what they are supposed to do and their mandate. And I think the greatest undoing why this is not happen is that these guys knows how to organize their politics, and they have made us as a country, Kenyans, to differentiate between the period of service delivery and what they are supposed to do and the time of politics. You know, when it comes to that politicking period, we don't, it seems like we don't forget what has happened in the past 5 years. And we are not surprised that at the end of 5 years, we end up even voting out those people who did well in terms of legislation and executing their mandate positively, and those people who never even worked end up being elected more times. This is the reason. These guys knows that what I need is I need money down there during the time of campaign. You see, the people says that I'll be on the ground. You know, this terminology that being on the ground is more important than what I do when I'm in that office. So there is a very big disconnect where in terms of our civic, let me say civic education for us as Kenyans in terms of assessing our leaders. Secondly, the challenge comes in terms of our political landscape as a country. You know, our politics are majorly based on, I can say, party politics. We don't assess the service or the mandate of our leaders, but we assess them basing on the parties. You'll find a good MP somewhere who has done tremendously well for the past 5 years in terms of legislation, putting the government on spot, or bringing better bills in parliament that can streamline the better being of the country. But at the end of the day, people will just ask, in which party is he vying on? Okay,
I'll just take a break, even as we come back, and I'll come back with you, Steve, on concerns of Kenyans about parliamentarians and the role of parliament, of oversight on other arms of government, amid concerns that parliament itself may be beholden to the executive. So how much representation are Kenyans getting? We take a short break. On New Dawn, much more still to come.